This is Lisa Miller and Associates, Florida Insurance Roundup, your podcast on the people, issues, and regulations shaping Florida's insurance market. Now, here's Lisa Miller.
Welcome, friends. The Florida Legislature ended its 2017 session this week 3 days late, and without passing most of the major insurance-related bills. These include assignment of benefits reform, workers' compensation reform as mandated by the state Supreme Court, and no-fault personal injury protection automobile insurance reform. Joining me is our producer of the Florida Insurance Roundup, Harvey Bennett, to take over host duties this episode, as I will be the guest to share insight and the backstory on these issues that seem so intractable. We'll talk about what happened, what's needed to make these policy reforms a reality in the next session, and I appreciate, Harvey, you joining me today.
Lisa, my pleasure. Let's start with the assignment of benefits, or as it's known by its initials, AOB. As you've pointed out many times on this program, AOB reform is needed to curb the abusive practices of third-party contractors and lawyers who use AOB agreements with policyholders to force insurance companies to pay greater claims than often justified, which is driving up property insurance rates in Florida, as you've talked about. Despite 4 bills to address the problem, none of them passed this session. Lisa, what happened?
Harvey, I believe it was a condition of the House and the Senate not being able to agree on what is best for reform. In the House, Representative Jamie Grant from Tampa, an amazing young gun, as I like to call him, he had the leadership and the forethought to put a bill together with a lot of input from consumers and insurance companies and all the stakeholders, trial lawyers, others who had an interest, the water extraction companies, you name it. I saw him very diligently trying to get all parties to the table. And his bill was very balanced. And it had a provision that if a person that brings a court case, if they lose, they have the responsibility for paying the court fees and the attorney's cost. His bill had wonderful disclosures so that consumers would know what they were signing. All of these great ideas, and it fell on deaf ears in the Senate for a variety of reasons, whether it was because we had senators who didn't believe that there was any goodwill among the insurance industry and that they would play fair with this new law. For whatever reason, the Senate just could not see its way clear to hear Representative Grant's bill, and everything stalled.
Well, and as we know, this is a critical issue because insurance rates, property insurance rates in the state keep rising. As a matter of fact, OIR put out a statement prior to the session noting that the approval rate for residential rate request increases went from 38% approved in 2014 to 72% approved in 2016, and I know you've talked about Citizens Property Insurance Corporation, which is the state's insurer of last resort. A whopping 45% of its claims are going into litigation. Huge increase. It was 12% back in 2011. In your opinion, what has to happen to AOB reform to make this doable? What does it boil down to?
It's going to take a leadership among the House and Senate. In talking with my colleagues who are as frustrated as I am after 4 or 5 years of us trying to bring some sensible reforms to the use of assignment of benefits, many have said, and I tend to agree with them, that it's just coming down to greed. You know, there's a lot of money at stake for those who use the assignment of benefits tool, if you will. It's a tool to file as many lawsuits as they possibly can, hoping that some will stick. You know, it's an age-old, it happened in the mortgage industry with firms that were doing that. It's kind of a numbers game. And so we've got to come to a place where both the House and the Senate feel like there is balanced reforms so that nobody wins over somebody else losing. And that's a tough call, but Representative Grant did a beautiful job trying to bring this in for a landing. We just couldn't get it through.
Let's move along to another insurance issue that most everyone agreed the Florida Legislature could not fail to resolve, and that is workers' compensation insurance reform. Listeners of the Florida Insurance Roundup know this is by far one of the most contentious and by court rulings, most immediate issues facing the legislature. The state Supreme Court last year ruled that our workers' comp system unconstitutional, one, for its caps on attorney fees, and two, the need to bridge the so-called coverage gap on those workers disabled enough to need further treatment. Lisa, what happened here?
These two bills, the House bill, the Senate bill, they at least were having conversations, whereas with the assignment of benefits issue, the House and Senate did not appear to be talking at all. At least in this case, you had bills that passed committees in the House and the Senate, so that's the precursor to having a final bill. It's just in the Senate, they had one idea of what the attorney's fee cap should be at $250 an hour, and the House thought $150 an hour was appropriate. I'm no lawyer. I don't know what the prevailing rate is, but there are those that believe if you're going to be in this business and you knew what your rates are going to be and the volume was such, you'd be able to make a comfortable living at $150 an hour. But other attorneys did not feel that way, and the Senate didn't feel that way. So that was the major sticking point between the two. And in the final hours of session, I'm talking Friday night, May 5th, at around 6:30, 7 o'clock, the sponsor of the House bill, Danny Burgess from Pasco County, young gun, bright, smart representative who cares deeply about this. You could tell from his testimony when he screamed into the microphone Friday night, every small business, every business owner in the state is watching what we do. He was frustrated because he couldn't come to an agreement with the Senate, and that lack of agreement caused the bills to die.
Meanwhile, workers' comp insurance rates in Florida have already gone up nearly 15% this past December, and with a forecast for future rate hikes on top of that. Lisa, what's the key to solving this issue?
I still believe that the way to solve any problem is through a good conversation. And unfortunately, we have so many polarizing discussions where whoever can do the one-upsmanship takes over common sense, conversation, and negotiation. And we saw it over and over again this session. And hopefully cooler minds will prevail. The business community is very upset that there is no bill because contractors and small businesses and those that are listening are probably going to pay the increased workers' comp rates for those of you that have to have it. And they're going to pass those increases on to the consumers that buy those goods and services. So communication, negotiation, and collaboration will be what we'll take in 2018.
And the prediction is the courts will continue to rule negatively on future worker comp cases until the legislature does make a change.
I certainly see that the court's having a huge say in how we proceed in workers' comp in our state.
Now on to Florida's no-fault automobile insurance system, known as PIP, short for Personal Injury Protection, in place since 1972 here in the Sunshine State. Despite significant legislative reforms going back to 2001 and most recently 2012, rates keep rising, as you pointed out on this program, Lisa, up 25% in 2015, the PIP rate. State CFO Jeff Atwater has had enough, as had key insurance regulators and legislators going into this 2017 session, but yet the bills to reform PIP failed. Why?
It is unfortunate that the crafters of the House bill didn't appear to have had a conversation with those in the Senate. And so again, you have two very diverse versions of reform. What does reform mean to the House? It meant eliminating medical payments coverage. It meant making all kinds of changes, including repealing PIP totally and having bodily injury liability being the lead coverage, if you will, after an accident. You had something similar to that in the Senate, but they did not want to eliminate the medical payments coverage, and there were some significant differences between the two. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, the Senate never even took up the House bill for consideration versus work comp, where they did have a conversation. They were trying to work it out. So unfortunately, that bill failed as well.
What's the solution to PIP, Lisa?
If I knew that, I would be queen for a day. I've had the privilege of talking with all sides of the PIP issue and have been in and out of regulation for the past 30 years. The biggest solution I see is for those who really are on the front lines of PIP, perhaps not all of us, a bunch of lobbyists and others that are kind of sitting in the Capitol, but to really take this out into the field and talk to the claims adjusters that are on the front lines and the folks that have been in accidents and the lawyers that are defending insurance companies, as well as those that are pursuing them. And I think having a conversation among all key stakeholders who are actually experiencing PIP may help bring about some ideas for solution.
Lisa, let's end on a positive note. One insurance measure that did pass this session was a flood insurance bill that promotes a private flood market in Florida. Do tell.
Interestingly, our champion from Pinellas County, Senator Jeff Brandes, who has been amazing, sounding the alarm bell that Florida needs to never, ever be reliant on the federal government for flood insurance like we are right now. He feels like we're being held hostage. That's the only market, perhaps, 95% of all insurance in the flood space is written by the federal government. We need to change that. We've proven in Florida that we've got a great property insurance market, a competitive auto insurance market, despite the problems with PIP. We're really, even in workers' comp, our rates are down 40, 50, 60%. So we know how to do insurance in Florida, and we should be able to do flood insurance in our great state. And Senator Brandes' flood insurance bill was just one more little incremental way of doing that.
Wonderful. Lisa, I'll turn it back over to you for your closing thoughts.
Thank you, Harvey. We would love to hear your thoughts on the issues we discussed on today's program. I am an open book when it comes to having great insurance dialogue, so you can email me at Lisa Miller at lisamillerassociates.com, and let's start a conversation, because that's what we need in the great state and our legislature. Thank you, Harvey. That's the Florida Insurance Roundup. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Lisa Miller. Until next time, be safe.
This has been Lisa Miller and Associates Florida Insurance Roundup, your podcast on the people, issues, and regulations shaping Florida's insurance market. For more information on today's program, please visit us on the web at www.lisamillerassociates.com.